Welcome, I'm Mike Patz. Any of you that are joining us from all over South Florida, love you guys. Got some of you coming up for Breakthrough Weekend next weekend. Very excited about that. Every one of you that's in Kanapaha right now, some of you are going to be at Breakthrough as well. We had a baptism today from one of you from Church Online. That was really cool in between services. Someone that joins us with the Church Online congregation came in and was baptized in between services. That was just beautiful. We're going to look at Genesis 41. Here it is. Talking about the life of Joseph. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, and behold, there came up out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive and plump, and they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came up out of the Nile after them and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly, thin cows ate up the 7 attractive, plump cows, and the Pharaoh awoke. And he fell asleep and dreamed a second time, and behold, 7 ears of corn, plump and good, were growing on one stalk, and behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the 7 plump full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So in the morning his spirit was troubled, and he sent and called for the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. Father, help. In Jesus' name, amen. Have a seat. And let's talk about Joseph. For a couple weeks, we've been talking about the valley and describing how Joseph has been in a valley. You may remember he was betrayed by his brothers and sold into slavery. And for years, he's a captive. And we've discussed the valley of darkness, the valley of delay, the valley where you don't know how long it's going to last, the valley where you're lonely, the valley where you're on the run, the valley where life stinks, the valley where life is hard, the valley where it's difficult, the valley where it's confusing. You don't know where to go and where to turn, and you're not sure what's going to happen, and it's dark. And we've talked about the valley, and we've talked about how the valley makes you broken, and the valley makes you desperate, and the valley makes you alert, and the valley makes you hungry. And one of the wild things we find in human history is that, strangely, valleys bring out the best in us. When we ask people, what's the best thing that ever happened to you? People tell you, they'll say things like, it's when I got cancer. It's when my marriage fell apart. It's when my wife left me for 3 months. It's when one of our children got really ill. And you'll find people describing valleys, how they were used to bring out the best in them. That truly valleys bring a fire that seems to forge people, and it tends to cleanse, and it tends to do something inside of people's lives. And so when people are in the pit, when they're in the valleys, great things tend to happen, and yet, valleys don't last forever. Eventually, you make it to a mountaintop. And the problem with the mountaintop is that mountaintops seem to be riddled with complacency. When you're on the mountaintop, there's a temptation to rely on your abilities, your charisma, your talent, your past, your understanding, your education, your achievement. And many people of faith become moral, spiritual failures on the mountaintops way more than in the valleys. People that thrive during the valley, they get to the mountaintop and it's as if they don't know what to do. Churches, even people of faith, we seem to not know exactly what to do with mountaintops. The Bible says, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. And Christians have a kind of an easy time weeping with those who weep. When someone's down, girl, we are praying for you. Girl, when you see someone weeping, man, you can get down on your knees and weep with them. But we have a very hard time, frankly, rejoicing with those who rejoice. If your job stinks and someone else just got a crazy bonus, like, man, I just got a $110,000 bonus. It's very hard for you to go like, woo, yeah. What we do is we weep with those who weep, and we tend to gossip about those who rejoice. Or at least we're tempted to. We don't say it like that. We're like, oh yeah. Even in prayer circles, if you see someone in a pit, we're like, man, we're going to pray for him. But what about people on the mountaintops? We don't really pray for those people. In fact, we have the opposite effect. You ever kind of just like driven around neighborhoods during Christmas time, and you see lights, and you go in one of the neighborhoods where there's like a National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation house, and you see all the lights, and you see some big, huge house, and someone's like, man, baby, look at that house. Look at them, man. Man, they got a lot of stuff. And we're like, yeah, they got a great house, but I bet they're not happy. But what if they are? Like, what if they've actually got way more stuff than you, and they're actually way happier than you and godlier than you too? This is where the Apostle Paul said in Philippians 4, verse 12, he described this. He said, I know how. I know how. And that's what this sermon's going to be, a how sermon. I know how to be brought low, to live in the valley, and I know how to abound, to get up on the mountaintop, to any and every circumstance. I have learned, the key word here, learned, doesn't come natural. I've learned the secret of facing plenty or hunger, abundance and need. And then, of course, the famous verse, I can do all things through him, through Christ, who gives me strength. But going back on verse 12, what he says is, I have learned how to be in the valley, and I've learned how to be on the mountaintop. And that's what I want to talk about, because some of you are in a valley right now, and I need you to know your valley's not going to last forever. You're going to get on a mountaintop. And some of you are frankly called to be Josephs that get up on mountaintops and you steward this. And man, I got to tell you, there's like this many people that figure out how to do this. The whole world figures out how to do valleys. I should say, there are very large numbers of people that navigate through valleys. It's like this many people that figure out the mountaintops. And it is my prayer that what Joseph figured out, because he's one of the brothers that gets it, that what Joseph does, we will do, if you're game. Now here's the whole sermon in a nutshell, and then we're going to go for it. Here it is. The mountain of success. Success can destroy you if you do not bring the dependency of the valley to fight the complacency of your mountaintop. Success can destroy you if you don't bring the dependency of the valley to counter the complacency of the mountain, because know that success will tempt you to be complacent. The mountaintops of success and achievement and prosperity will tempt you in ways that the valley never did. And it is my prayer today that God will teach us, and it is my prayer, God, teach us how to live in the valley or in the mountaintop. And if you're in agreement, say, let's do it. Number one, stay desperate. Stay desperate. Mike, how do you do it? You stay desperate. When you get on the mountaintop, stay desperate. To quote a beer commercial, stay hungry, my friends. How do you navigate when you're on the mountaintop? You stay desperate. Let's talk about Joseph's story. Let's back up. He starts off in a pit. His brothers hate him, so they sell him into slavery. They throw him in a pit. And when he's in the pit, he gets sold into slavery. He ends up in Potiphar's house. When you get to Potiphar's house, it will be very tempting to settle for Potiphar's house, because Potiphar's house is better than a pit. But you were made for more than a pit, Joseph. You were made for more than a pit, woman of God. When you get to chapter 39, you can feel like, if you're Joseph, that Potiphar's house is an upgrade. In fact, we'll find out that Joseph prospers in Potiphar's house. And as he works with his hands, as he's faithful with little, God gives him charge over more. So the man that starts as a slave gets promoted to be the number 2 guy in all of Potiphar's house. Just to give you clarity, Potiphar is the chief steward of Pharaoh, which means he was probably the commander-in-chief of the Egyptian nation. He's the number 2 guy in that guy's house. A slave is the chief officer in Potiphar's house. All I got to say is this. Some of us in this room right now, we are in pits, and we are very tempted to say, I'm in a pit, and I'm going to throw a tantrum, and I'm not going to be faithful, and so I'm just going to wait for God to pull me out of the pit, and he will. But you will go through this pit test again. What he's wondering is, if you'll be faithful with little, then he can give you charge over more. Be faithful. Has your baseball coach told you to swing the bat 50 times a day? Be faithful. Has your volleyball coach told you just to hit volleyballs off a wall for 15 minutes? Be faithful. Has someone told you just to go work your craft an hour a week, just working on the business, not just in the business? Be faithful. Has your boss told you to make 15 calls a day, but he'll never know the difference if you only do 5? Be faithful. You may feel like you're in a pit. What I'm telling you, Joseph, is Joseph ends up in the penthouse of Potiphar's house. And yet what we're going to find is he realizes he wasn't just made for that. Beware of coming out of the pit and finding too much refuge in Potiphar's house. Because Ephesians 3:20 tells us this. I love this verse. Ephesians 3:20 describes, it says, now to him who is able to do far, what's the next word? More. Mike, I'm in bad financial straits right now. Listen, I'm talking to you today about someone that can do far more. Mike, my family's in trouble. He can do far more. I've got a past. He can do far more abundantly than all that we ask or think or even imagine, according to the power that's working within us. What this means is that God comes to you and he says, hey, all right, church, greenhouse, friends, maybe you're even agnostic. Let me just tell you this. He comes to you and he says, all right, some of you sitting right there at Kanapaha. You're sitting there in a chair right now, and maybe you're stuck in a spot. And God's like, what's the vision of your life? What do you want? Like, what's your dream? What is it that God's put on your heart? What's the desire of your heart? Tell me the vision. And it says almost as if God comes and says, I'll see your vision, and I'll raise you. Do you understand what this just said? He can do abundantly, far more than you could ask. Can you imagine that? I could ask for a lot, and God's like, okay, I can see you, and I'll raise you. Can you believe that? Will you believe that? Stay desperate. See, Joseph's suffering, what he doesn't realize, it's preparing him for a palace. Some of you, I just got to remind you one more time, your valley, if you'll do it the right way, it's preparing you for something unbelievable. There's a book I'm reading right now, it's called Rookie Smarts. And the idea behind Rookie Smarts is that rookies, newbies, beginners have an edge that more experienced people sometimes do not have. Rookies, they tend to go and start practicing earlier than everybody else. They tend to stay longer than everybody else. Rookies have wide-eyed open. Their eyes are wide open. Rookies are sort of desperate. Rookies are still desperate. Rookies, they have a problem like rookie business people, rookie surgeons. What they'll do is rather than just jumping straight in, what they will do is they will oftentimes consult with, they say, 5 times as many people for help. So they will consult the experts 5 times as often as the so-called experts will themselves, okay? So a rookie, they will be a little bit more cautious and a little bit more adventurous, so they will actually try some things out, but they're almost treating themselves constantly as, I've got to stay alert, aware, lives are in the balance, I got to watch out what I'm doing. So rookies have this edge that more experienced people stop having because rookies are still questioning, they're still curious, they're still learning, they want to improve, they want to keep on being educated. And what happens is after someone's been doing it for a while, they're like, well, I've already been there, done that, got that. And what they actually found out was that the best experienced surgeons, business people, athletes, are the people that find a way to stay desperate enough to maintain rookie smarts. So for example, like one of the big photographers in America right now, when they were interviewing her, like, man, you just do amazing work as a photographer. How do you do this? And her answer, well, it's just, this is what I do. Every time I go to a photo shoot, I act like it's my first time. Every time she goes in, she's like, there might be something I don't know. There might be something I need to learn. There might be something I'm like, I'm kind of looking around and trying to figure this out. Maybe some of you right now, you're in Orlando, you're watching this, and you're like, man, but I feel like I'm already kind of moved along. You don't move along. What rookies know is, man, there's so much I don't know. I will not allow what I do know. Watch, listen, leaders, don't allow what you do know to blind you from being humble enough to acknowledge what you don't know, because rookies are just kind of humble enough to say, I don't know. Rookies are cool with that. The more experience you get, the more you're like, yeah, I already know that. You ever seen that? You ever talk to someone and you're asking them a question, and before you're done asking the question, they're already answering? They're not rookies anymore. And then you can meet, sometimes you'll see someone, they're 82 years old, and they're asking questions, and they're curious. There's a friend I have right now, and he's in his 70s, and he is way wiser, way godlier. I mean, I'm not worthy to reach down and to file his nails. I mean, let's just say it like that. And yet every time I get around him, he's always asking me questions. He's in ministry, and he'll ask me questions. I'm thinking, stop asking me questions. I need to ask you questions. And he's like, I'll catch myself 20 minutes into giving him some of my little words of wisdom. I'm like, McFly, remember who you are. You need to be asking him. He doesn't need anything from you. What are you thinking right now, See, this is what rookies do. Rookies stay desperate. They keep asking questions. Stay desperate. My daughter right now, I just want to warn you, she just got her license this week. And that could be a dangerous thing, right? But I noticed that while she's driving, at this stage, in fact, they tell us that new drivers, they're not very tempted to text and drive because they're so rookie-ish that they're not stupid enough to think they got this. So right now there's a phenomenon happening. Less and less people are riding bicycles on roads because back in the old days, you just didn't ride bikes at night because drinking and driving was a problem at night, okay? Well, texting and driving, they say, is as or more dangerous than drinking and driving. The problem with texting and driving is it happens 24 hours a day. Typically, most drunk drivers did it at night. So now what's happened is the roads are getting less and less safe for bicycle riders because the longer you drive, the more you feel like, man, I got this, and then boom, you hit a person, you hit a wall, you hit a tree. See, what happens when you've got rookie smarts is if only you could keep the alertness and the humility of the first week driver by the time you've been driving for 30 years. Those are the best drivers of all. You get the idea. Stay Desperate. Don't settle for the success of Potiphar's house, Joseph, when there's a palace that's waiting for you. Number 2, stay dependent. How do you navigate success? How do you steward success? You bring the dependency of the valley to the complacency of the mountaintop. Bring the dependency. When you were in the valley, you said, God, I need you. To say like the old hymn writer said, I need thee, Lord, I need thee. I need thee how often? Every hour I need thee. This is when you're in the valley, you're like, God, I'm about to go nuts. I'm about to go crazy. Have you ever been in such a valley? You're like, I can't even think straight. God, I think my life cannot go on unless you give me strength to have my life go on. You ever felt like that? You ever had those moments? I need you. Jesus, help. When you're in the valley, prayer is accidental. Like when you're in the valley, you learn to pray by accident. You're like, when pray without ceasing, piece of cake. What else are you going to do? Praying without ceasing is like burping. It just comes up naturally. You know, like, whoa, that was it. Oh, help, Lord, help, Lord. Oh, Jesus. I mean, when you learn the very profound prayers when you're in the valley. Help, Lord Jesus. I mean, I'd say when I'm in the valley, about 90% of my prayers are just a few words. I've got a very small vocabulary. I need help, Jesus, now. You ever had those? I mean, maybe you like something deeper than that. I don't have a lot deeper than that. When I'm in the valley, Jesus, help, quick, right? But when you get up on the mountaintop, you start losing sight of that, which is why part of the secret of this is staying dependent. So Joseph's in the penthouse of Potiphar's house. He's up in the penthouse. Potiphar's wife comes up to him. And the Bible says that when he's made his way up, it's very interesting. When Joseph becomes successful, that is the cue when it says that Potiphar's wife notices him. I want you to see this. As he becomes successful, she starts to notice him. And I need you to see this. There are some ways in which when you become successful, you become more attractive. People that never notice you on Facebook, all of a sudden, they notice you on Facebook. People that never notice you, when you ascend to the penthouse, they don't notice you like they did when you were living back in Section 8 housing. Now that you're in the penthouse, now everyone wants to come around and they remember you. Now there is a temptation. Watch, there are distractions, assignments, and temptations that come in success that never come in the valley. There are some of you that need to know this. Has God prospered and blessed you and made you successful? If he has, there will be temptations that come your way that other people that are in the valley are not ever having to deal with. And some of you are like, yeah, I'd love to have those. Yeah, do you realize like this many people can never handle it? That's why I'm saying you, there's got to stay desperate, but you're going to have to stay dependent. See, I struggle with this. I'm like, man, God, Joseph's so faithful. And Potiphar's wife comes up. She said, and we're going to talk about temptation next week, but she comes up and says, lie with me. And then he's like, no. And every day, day after day, she's like, lie with me. Man, I got to tell you, if you've been a slave and you've had no pleasure in some woman, and he's probably married to someone good looking, and she says, hey, lie with me. And, you know, that's not even as forceful as the Hebrew word. It's like, sex, now. It's like that. I mean, can you imagine you're a man that's had no pleasure, and then you've got a woman that's just like speaking your language, and you're like, and yet he stays, and he say, how could I do this and sin against God? And so we find that, and it bothers me, like, God, why would you let him get tested like this? I mean, here's the catch, guys. Everybody wants a testimony, but nobody wants to test, right? Oh man, Lord, give me a testimony, That's what I want. I want a big old testimony. I want to become an attorney. Do you want to go past the bar exam? Man, you want to take the LSAT, Everybody wants success. Everybody wants that testimony. But do you realize your testimony will mean there will be a test before the testimony? Stay dependent. So, of course, he does not give in to her temptation. He stays dependent on God. And so she falsely accuses him of rape. There's no one else there. There's just the two of them. So she says that he raped her when he did not. He gets thrown into prison. He must have had favor with Potiphar because he would have been killed if he did not. So Potiphar probably did not believe her, but he's got to do something, so he goes into prison. So to the prison he goes. So if he goes from a pit to the penthouse, and now he's back in a prison, and when he's in prison, he's about to have some other stuff pop up, namely, he saw his natural talents on display in Potiphar's house, his administration. He's now about to have his spiritual gifts on display because two people come into this prison that come straight from Pharaoh's courts, which are the baker and the cupbearer. And these guys have both been accused of doing something wrong, and they're going to be in trouble. And so they're brought before him, and they've had dreams. Both of them end up having dreams. They get brought to Joseph, and now we see Joseph's spiritual gift of dreams on display. He goes to the first guy, he interprets the dream, he interprets it accurately, goes to the second guy, interprets it accurately, and one of the guys gets lifted up, one of the guys gets killed, one of the guys gets let go, and exactly the number of days that Joseph says. And Joseph kind of gets to the end of this, and while the guy is leaving to go become free, the cupbearer of the king is about to be free, Joseph tells him, please remember me. And there's a part of Joseph that you can feel. He's somehow hoping, please be my connection. Please let my gift be my deal. Have you seen what I'm doing here in the prison? Because he made his way up in the, have you seen my natural talent? Have you seen my spiritual gift? Now I've got this good connection. I know someone famous on Twitter that tweeted me, whatever it is. Someone, I met the president one day, the president of UF, I got to talk to him, the president of Nova Southeastern, you name it, whatever it is. When you get that, and he's kind of, remember me. And yet the Bible says he forgot Joseph. And Joseph just stays there rotting in prison. It's as if God is saying, Joseph, you're going to be delivered, but you're not going to be delivered because of your charisma. It's not going to be because of your talent. It's not going to be because of your gift. It's not going to be because you're good looking. It's not going to be because you know how to make a turn a profit. It's not going to be because of anything but me, Joseph. Church, are you willing to live like that? Stay dependent. 2 more years go by. Stay dependent. It's very interesting. We come here in 41, verse 9. We pick up the story. Of course, I read you the dreams that Pharaoh had. Then the chief cupbearer. After 2 years, then the chief cupbearer. 24 months in a prison. Then the cupbearer said to his Pharaoh, oh, now I remember my offenses. And he's like, oh yeah, back when I was in custody, I had these dreams. And there is a guy that does dreams. In fact, he really nails the dreams thing. He's like really an expert at the dreams thing. Verse 14, then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they quickly brought him out of the pit. Couldn't stay out of pits, couldn't keep his robes on. Crazy thing, life he had. And when he had shaved himself and changed his clothes, he came in before Pharaoh. Just let me pause real fast. If you're going to come in the presence of a king, you got to get ready. One day, every one of you, under the sound of my voice, is going to stand before the Pharaoh of the universe, God Almighty. And let me just say it, you got to get clean to show up before God. You got to be ready. I mean, that's not what this sermon is about, but let me just say, get ready. There's some of you that are not ready. Shave yourself. Get yourself clean. Get the new robes that you can't purchase yourself. Get a righteousness you can't work with your own hands. Get ready for the king, because it's appointed for all men to die once and show up before the king. Anyway. That was free. Verse 15. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I've had a dream, and there's no one who can interpret it. I've heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. And I love this. Joseph answered Pharaoh, it is not in me. What? This is your chance. Play your card. Why, yes, I can. Show him your resume. Dream dude. Wild administrator. Everywhere I go, I make things happen. What if your success is more contingent on your Redeemer than your resume? What if what's supposed to happen in your life is not supposed to be because you can boast enough of how high your batting average is, or what it is that you can do? You hear what he said? It is not in me. This reminds me of John the Baptist. When they came to John the Baptist, they said, John, are you the Messiah? And he says this. He says, they said, who are you? And his opening answer was, I am not. I am not. Well, who are you? I am not. That's who I am. I know the I am, but let me tell you my name. His name is I am. My name is I am not, okay? You get wisdom when you start saying I am not. It's a cool Louis Giglio book called I Am Not, But I Know I Am, okay? It's just a beautiful thought when Joseph comes and he says, it is not in me. I don't have it in me, comma, but God will answer and give Pharaoh the answer. Now watch this. This is what I need you to see. Pharaoh is worshipped as God on earth in Egypt. So Joseph is going to God on earth and he's saying, oh, by the way, you're not God on earth. Joseph is going to God on earth and making it clear, I need to let you know that I know who the real God is. I need you to know that I know that he knows what you don't know, okay? I don't know and you don't know, but he knows, which means it's kind of like one of these things. Here is God on earth. Here is God who knows. That means he is greater than what he's not, okay? I don't have it in me. You don't have it in you. He does. And he gives him this answer where he's at the point where he says, you know what? I've been through so many valleys at this time that you could tell me you're going to kill me. You could tell me I'm going down. I've already been broken. I've already died to self. So yeah, you might slice my throat right now for saying this, but you need an answer. You need an answer from God. Would you be willing to be a God guy? Would you be a God lady? Some guy comes up to you, girl, come lie with me. And you say, God, no. Your flesh is saying, yeah. But inside you're like, no, God. No, it is not in me because God is in me. That's who is inside of me is God. Who's inside of me is God. Verse 28, he says, it is as I told. And he gives him the answer. He describes to him the dreams. And then he says, it is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he's about to do. Man, this brother is bold. He's bold. He's like, listen, you're not God. He is. God has told Pharaoh. Can you imagine saying this in front of a bunch of people? The true God has told the little God. Capital G has told little g. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout the land of Egypt. After that, there will be 7 years of famine. And all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will be consuming the land. Verse 33, now, therefore, let Pharaoh select a discerning and wise man, set him over the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land to take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of the good years that are coming and store up the grain in the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it, that the food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. Now, here's my question. Where in the world did Joseph learn all that? Potiphar's house and a prison. Church, I need you to understand. Listen, do not miss this. 2 years have gone by. 2 years of learning in the school of the prison. 2 years being in the university of the prison. What felt like a setback was a set up. Listen, my friends, setbacks. Listen, sometimes your setbacks are setups when your God is the Lord. Do you hear what I'm saying? It may seem like the biggest setback in the world, but it is your setup, Joseph. This is what you were destined for. Stop fighting the setbacks when God is your Lord. Submit to your God and watch what he'll do. This does not mean you sit passively by and do nothing. Joseph is clinging and clawing and working, and he's faithful and he's doing his business, but he's waiting ultimately on God. And what we see now is that he comes and he brings him this whole answer, and he says, this is what needs to happen. So we see in verse 37, Pharaoh says, this pleased the Pharaoh and all his servants. Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there's none so discerning and wise as you. A slave gets told this from the most important man on the planet, you shall be over my house. All my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards to the throne will I be greater than you. Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I've set before you over the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand, put it on Joseph's hand, and he clothed him in garments of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. And he made him ride in a second chariot, and they called out before him, bow the knee. Just like he dreamed years earlier. The chiefs are bowing before his chief. In verse 45, and then Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zaphanath-Paneah. Pharaoh gives him his own special name. It's clearly an act of God. It's an act of God. Now, what are you saying? Watch, friends. Stay dependent on God. Do you see, even to the very end here, he's saying it's God, it's only God. I implore you, Joseph, position yourself in a way where you need God. Pharaoh has brought him up. Pharaoh's got a dream problem. Joseph has a dream answer. And yet when he asks him, it would have been very easy just to share his gift. But instead he positions himself where he will need God. I hear that you do dreams. What's he do? He drops God into the whole equation. Listen, man, it's not in me. It's God. Little blah later, he tells him the dream. He drops it again. Listen, man, it's all God. He positions himself to need God. This week I was at Publix, and when I was there, we have a lot of kids. If you're new around here, we have 8 children. So everywhere we go, it's like a pack of people, So we're at Publix, and we're coming out, and so the guy's like, would you like help out with your cart, at the grocery store? And of course, there's a bunch of us, so it's embarrassing to say yes, but I kind of had that sense of like, talk to the guy, So I'm like, oh, sure, come on out. He's like, all right. And so he's coming out, So we're making our way out there, and I'm just having that stirring in my heart, like, talk to him about me, I'm like, oh. And he's kind of giving you all the signals, like, this is socially awkward, it's strange, it's weird, it feels, And so I just start talking, hey, what do you think about Jesus? And as soon as I open that can of worms and we start talking, we're kind of going around. And what happened was I didn't know where I was going to go. And of course, I'm like a preacher. That means I'm like a professional Jesus talker, I guess, or whatever. I don't know what to say. It's awkward. What do you say? It's weird. It's like, it feels uncomfortable. It's like, it's strange. And it kind of starts, but here's the catch. Sometimes you open your mouth, you position yourself in a place. God, I need you to come through, or else this is going to be crazy awkward. By the way, that's what giving does. The reason I don't know how Christians are still fighting about tithing. I hear all these arguments like tithing. Oh, it's Old Testament law. Yeah, there was an Old Testament law. Watch, giving and tithing and generosity, it's not law, it's a way. I don't think you're under a curse if you're not going to go. I think you're under follies. Here's the catch. When someone tithes, the principle on tithing was you took the first portion of what you have and you gave it to God. Here's what tithing does. It forces you to be positioned to be dependent. You have 10 sheep are pregnant. They're all going, bah, push, and they're getting ready to push. Sheep number 1 pushes out little Junior, and you got Junior. You're like, and God says, okay, give him to me. Firstborn's mine. And you're like, but wait a minute, shouldn't I wait for the other 9 to have their babies? Because then I'll know if I'm good. It's like, no, I want you to give me number 1 and depend on me for number 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's a way. This is what generosity does. If God prompts your heart and there's someone in need, and you're like, oh man, if I go give this away, what will I do? What it is, it forces you to be dependent. Here's what I'm telling you guys. The mountain of success will turn you into a complacent fool. You need to bring the dependency of the valley to fight the complacency of the mountaintop. Position yourself accordingly. Some of it, when you're in the valley, it's accidental. When you're in the valley, you ain't got no money. When you're in the valley, you ain't got no options. When you're in the valley, you got nothing. When you're on the mountaintop, now you actually have options. Now you have to choose to position yourself to be dependent. And all I'm saying is this, Joseph, when you get to that mountaintop and he says, I hear you do dreams, before you just go, let me show my resume, why don't you go ahead and drop the word? G-O-D is in this place. And he's the only one that can do it. Number 3. Not only be desperate, not just be dependent, but, and this is probably the biggest one, you're going to have to keep going deeper. And this is where the story changes, because honestly, the sermon up until now, it's just a leadership principle. Hey guys, stay hungry. Hey guys, stay desperate. But it's got to be beyond that, because when you read Hebrews 11, you get a 1-verse synopsis of the life of Joseph in Hebrews 11:22. And it's kind of a fascinating thing, because in Hebrews 11, we have what's called the Hall of Faith. It's the hall of all the faith people of the Bible. And this is what it says about Joseph, and this is why it's wild, because he's got all these chapters in the Old Testament. We've got this one verse in Hebrews 11 that sums him up, and it goes like this. By faith, Joseph, at the end of his life, made mention of the exodus of the Israelites, and he gave his directions concerning the bones. And you're like, huh? That's how you're summing this brother's life up? What in the world? Okay, so I married a Puerto Rican. Do we have any Puerto Ricans in here right now? Okay. Roberto Clemente is in the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame is where they put all the greatest baseball players. If you make it in the Hall of Fame. Are there any Puerto Ricans in here that know how many hits Roberto Clemente got? 3,000 hits. Now, if you get 3,000 hits, you basically make it into the Hall of Fame. Roberto Clemente got exactly 3,000 hits. I think this was like a prerequisite for me to marry my Puerto Rican wife. How many hits? It's like when we were doing our vows. And how many hits did Roberto Clemente get? He died early, I think, in a plane crash. He's in the Hall of Fame now. And if you go into the Hall of Fame, if you want to know what Roberto Clemente is known for, he was a great player, stole bases, but he's known for 3,000 hits. You're like, Roberto Clemente, 3,000 hits. The boy could get on base. Hall of Fame, there he is. Here's my question. What is Joseph known for? If you think about David, people say about David, they're like, man, it's like music and it's drama and he's got a slingshot. Little David, he's a nobody. He's in the valley, big Goliath. And the music's going, dun, 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 dun. And it's like, you got this whole thing going. It's like Mission Impossible music. And he says, you come with swords and spears. I come in the name of God. Yahweh. And he kind of like breaks it down like this, And then the Goliath is like, whoop, and he goes to, you're like, oh, it's a story, And you come to what was Daniel known for? The lions. He stares down the lion. And then you come to Joseph. What was Joseph known for? By faith, Joseph, he mentioned the Exodus. And you're like, what? You mentioned the Exodus? Like, he said no to Potiphar's wife. He built a kingdom. He did a world hunger relief program. And what you're going to put on his Hall of Fame stone is he mentioned the Exodus and said, bury my bones there? Sorry, Joseph, did someone get the story wrong? Because that sounds awfully lame. Exodus is coming, guys. Bury my bones over there in the promised land. Woo! All right, Joey. That's the story. But if you don't get this, you've missed the whole story. When you read this story, it's crazy because you come and he gets on the mountaintop and he gets named Zaphanath-Paneah. And they say, Joseph, man, you've arrived. You're in the palace. You've got a chariot. You've got a new name. You've got favor. You're the most powerful man in the whole world. Look what Egypt has given you. Check this out. And it looks like it's so amazing. And you say to him, you finally made it. But the question is, where is his heart? And look what happens in verse 50. It says, before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh because he said, God has made me forget all my hardship. The name of the second, he called him Ephraim, for God made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. I want you to see this. Joseph gets to the mountaintop, and he names his son. And the question on the floor is, and if you're a Hebrew writer or Hebrew reader and you're reading this story, you're thinking to yourself, Joseph, it's been 20 years now. Where's your heart? It's been 20 years now. You're at the top. Where are you at? Did you lose your soul? Your people have abandoned you. Your brother stabbed you in your back. Your God seemed like he was non-existent. Where is your heart now? What is he? And here's the catch. From the mouth, the heart proceeds. And he gets a son. And the question is, what's he going to name his son? Is he going to reach down into his Egyptian vocabulary? Or is he going to reach down into his Hebrew vocabulary? And he says, I'll tell you my son. His name is not Zaphanath-Paneah. His name is not Zaphanath-Pharaoh. His name is Manasseh. Because God has He's caused me to forget. Because when you get God, I don't know what valley you've gone through, but when you get God, it is as if the pain of the past, it blends into this worship where you realize he was actually there all along. But he doesn't stop, because watch, what he basically says is, I will not be defined by the pain of my past. I refuse to be defined by the abuse of my past. I will be defined by the promise of my God. But then he's got Ephraim. And with Ephraim, he's got this, gosh, I love this. He says, and the Lord has given me this double blessing. He's made me fruitful. And then he says, in the land of my affliction. Did you hear this? Watch. In the land of my affliction. What do you mean the land of your affliction? If I'm an Egyptian, I'd be offended. It's like, what are you doing calling Egypt the land of affliction, man? Your own people abandoned you. Your own people threw you into slavery, threw you in a pit. And here you are, you're in Egypt, and look what Potiphar, he raised you up. Look at Pharaoh, he raised you up. He took a chance on you. He's treated you like a son. Look at, what do you mean it's the land of your affliction? He's raised you up. You're in the palace. You've got a ring. You've got a robe. And it's like he says, he's like, listen, man, I need you to know this. I was made for more than a pit, so I got into Potiphar's house. But I was made for more than a penthouse, so I went back to a pit. And then I made it to the palace. But something in me lets me know, I was made for more than this. All the palaces in the world mean nothing. All the stuff, it's like, it doesn't, what does it mean? I want something, I was made for the promise. And do you hear what he says? By faith, he mentioned the Exodus. Because his people are going to be brought to Egypt to save them. But he already tells them, listen, 400 years, we're getting the heck out of here. Because we weren't made for this place. We were made for the promised land. That's where we were made for. That's the place I was born for. Take my bones to the promised land. Which is why when the writer of Hebrews is writing, he's like, you want to know what Joseph was amazing at? Joseph is amazing, not just because he says no to Pharaoh's wife, not just because he gets a bunch of money, not because he even saves the world. It's because he got it. He realized, no matter how good this earth gets, it's always Egypt to me. No matter how good see, this is how you get to the mountaintop. God might even give you a good car, but you recognize it's still Egypt, man. God might give you a good house. It's still Egypt. Take my bones to the promised land, man. I was made for so much more than this. When we had our fast going at the beginning of the year, we did like a 10-day fast. And day like 2 and 3, man, I got to be honest, all I was thinking about was food. I kept thinking, man, I was counting the days and hours until day 10 when we could eat again. And then as the fast kept going, something happened. And I started remembering, I've eaten 1 million meals in my life, and I get hungry again. all the best meal, the best food, the best steak, the best chicken parm, the best bread, the best butter, my soul was made for more than what these taste buds can taste. I've tasted the pleasures of this earth. And something happens when you've been in the valley. Something happens when you've been tried and tested. Something happens when you get in the presence of him, because he gets defined by this. But God was with Joseph. 1 minute in the presence of God does more than all the pleasures of this earth. Take my bones to the promised land. I wasn't made for this. I was made for so much more than this. How do you make it when you get up on the mountains of success? You remember there is no mountain on this planet that will give you what you want. Because when you get there, by the way, maybe some of you say, well, you know what? I'll go ahead and try it anyway. Then let me tell you what Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived, said. Because he got to every mountain every human ever got to. When you get to the top of the mountain, you keep finding out it's elusive and it does not satisfy. All the pleasure, all the joy, all the success, it's fleeting. There is but one mountain that can satisfy your soul, and it's called the mountain of God, which is why Joseph said, man, take me to the promised land. That's why this sermon is not just about getting your eyes on Joseph. It's about getting your eyes on the one that Joseph looked to. It's not just about looking at Joseph, who must have been looking through some bars and saying, my God, why have you forsaken me? It's him realizing at the end he was never forsaken, because there would come one who would come to earth, his greatest relative, Jesus, who would come and would pray, my God, why have you forsaken me? He would be forsaken so that we would never be forsaken. He would lose the palace to come into our pit so we could have his palace. He would get stabbed in the back and take on our pit and our slavery and our pain so that we could know his presence and his palace and his joy forever. And it's when you look to him, it shifts inside of you and you realize the reason there's only one verse about Joseph in Hebrews 11 is because the whole story was about Jesus the whole time. And if you'll look to him, and if you'll take him up on your mountain, you're going to know how to abound. If you'll cling to him in your valley, you're going to know how to be abased. And if we could become a people, could you imagine if we did, that learn how to be abased and how to abound? We could turn this world upside down. But right now, there might be some of you that need a Manasseh moment. There might be some of you that it's time to go verbal. It's time to have an Ephraim moment. It's time to say, Manasseh, because you've been speaking Egyptian long enough. There's some of you, it's time to say, Jesus is Lord. There's some of you that have been pausing long enough in your own way. You've been calling your own shots. Pharaoh calls the shots in Egypt, but he did not call the shots in Joseph's heart. Manasseh was his son's name. And there might be some of you right now, today's the day that you're supposed to go public. Today's the day you're supposed to go verbal and have your Manasseh moment. Campus pastors, take it from here, and I want you to call people to their Manasseh moment, to their Ephraim moment, to their moment of saying, I renounce Egypt, I renounce my sin, I renounce my past, and I take on my God. And if you're here right now, maybe you've never been baptized. You know what baptism is? It's a Manasseh moment. Baptism is where you say, you know what? I'm in Manasseh. Jesus is my King. He's my Lord. Maybe there's some of you that are even watching right now, and you've never had that Manasseh moment. You've never had that place where you've said, you know what? My God is the Lord. And in about 20 seconds, I'm going to pray a prayer that you can join me in. A prayer doesn't save you. Jesus does. The cross does. The gospel does. But you need to say yes. And this might be the beginning of that. So I want you to bow your head, open your heart. And if you've been far from God and unforgiven, if you've been wayward and apart, separated from God by your sins, this is your chance to repent and believe the great news that he's come. If you need to do that, pray this with me. With your lips, doesn't have to be loud, but do it with your lips. Dear God, have mercy on me. You love me. I believe you love me. I believe you love me. I believe you love me. I receive it. Forgive me. Change me. Make me new. Make me yours. This is important. Say this. Say, Jesus, you are the King. Be the Lord of my life. I turn to you and I give you me. Take my life because I'm yours. Thank you for joining us at Greenhouse today. Thanks for being with us in heart and your spirit. Every time we gather in his name, and he is there. And it's a joy for us to make much of Jesus. We hope that you've really had your eyes fixed on him, worshiped on the spot, and know where to go with it this week. If by chance you need some prayer, we'd love to pray with you. You could email us at prayer@greenhousechurch.org and
confidentially, you can go and reach out to someone that would love to be there to pray with you, to agree with you in anything that you have a need for. prayer@greenhousechurch.org. Let us be the church with you. And if by chance you just want to make a difference in this world, I can promise you this. We are wildly committed to being dangerously generous. We give more than 50% of everything away to missions and the poor. If you'd be willing to help us do this and what we're doing here, why don't you consider giving and being a part of the vision of what it is that we're doing? You can click on one of the links that'll just kind of show you how that you can give, and literally the money that you give would be going to change things from America all over the world. We'd love for you to be a part. Thanks for being with us today. God bless you.